A very warm welcome to all our listeners on The Mystery Hour, the show where we bring to you real-life stories of blood-curdling crime directly from the files of the State Investigation Bureau. Tonight, on our program, we have Detective Inspector Dibakar Dotto. Thank you for being with us, Inspector.
Well, thanks for having me here, old boy. Might I confess, I'm an ardent listener of your show.
We're honored, sir. Thank you. Inspector Dotto has been with the Bureau for close to 3 decades and has been involved in a number of top-tier investigations into murders, forgeries, and abductions. Most notably, he's received numerous accolades for his outstanding services as Special Field Agent on the infamous Grenville Gonzalez abduction case in 1996. We congratulate you, sir, for your exceptional work.
All in a day's work, my dear boy, all in a day's work. And besides, that's what we get paid for, don't we?
So tell me, Inspector, what do we have for our listeners tonight? When we were off the air, you said it's going to be something quite off the beaten track. Me and my audience are simply brimming with curiosity. Do tell us.
Oh, yes, well, you see, I was thinking of narrating one of those top-tier investigations you were talking about, but just before leaving my house for your show, I glanced at my old bookcase in our living room, and this idea came to me. You see, my wife has this hobby of collecting film magazines, and that's what takes up most of that bookcase. So I remembered this little incident, this obscure little affair, the truth of which has never really surfaced, mind you. An actor had died, you see, and his family implored me to suppress the truth behind it. At the time, I saw nothing wrong in that request, and I did as they asked. But that was a very long time ago, spring of '89, if I remember correctly. The legacy of Aryan Sengupta has waned considerably with time. So tonight, I have for you and your listeners the very letter in the murderer's own hand, confessing the act.
You don't say. Aryan Sengupta. That name does ring a bell. Was it not that actor who was awarded for his role in that Tagore classic back in the mid-'80s?
That is the one. He had a very short career, as far as I recall. Well, my wife knows more than me on this matter, and, might I say, some of her wisdom has brushed off. Now, the few who remember Aryan still praise him for his versatility on screen, but I'm afraid he's not the sort of actor who gets talked about nowadays. As it was, his death was a very hushed-up business.
But he was a very well-known actor for his time, and if that letter you have over there will bring to light on our show who did it and why, well, my dear listeners, I think we have our show for tonight. Do go on, Inspector. We are all ears.
Yes. Well, you see, the body was found in a state of decay. Aryan had sent his manservants on leave, and there wasn't a soul in that huge mansion of his, save for himself. I think one of his producer friends paid him a visit a couple of days after the incident and found the front door ajar. He said he'd come to sign Aryan up for one of his period productions, and, well, it was he who found the locked room where the stench was coming from, and, well, you get the idea.
Good Lord. What a ghastly business.
This letter was on the victim's person. A most extraordinary tale. I'll read it as best I can. Shall I begin?
Oh, please do.
Okay, then. Pay close attention. I believe it would be considered to be very unwise for someone to openly explain the exact reason for committing an act generally deemed by the civilized society as a crime.
But the definition of a crime is a very vague one, according to the civilized society. And the definition of a civilized society even vaguer. So I have decided to put forward the complete and unadulterated reason, or reasons, if you will, for the act I'm about to commit. Without this exposition, I'm afraid that the truth will be wiped out of existence by the constant and untiring efforts of the print and electronic media, along with the singular inefficiency of the police department and the pathetic army of incompetent investigators. I write this explanation knowing fully well that you, the reader, may never come to accept its contents with an open mind. But I put forth the facts with a mind unburdened by the fears of apprehension, for I have taken the best and most foolproof measures to cover up any traces, or as the detective calls them, clues that may lead the ant to the picnic basket. I met with the individual the world knows by the name of Aryan Sengupta when I was only 20 years of age. He was a charming young lad, remarkably handsome for his age and very polite in his ways. Aryan was the sort of boy one's mother wishes her son to become and one's son begins to envy. But such feelings of jealousy did not come to me when I first met him. We were both students of the same college of the same age, and were both pursuing our bachelor's degree in Bengali, our mother tongue. But we also had another thing in common. Both of us were strongly inclined towards the performing arts. Aryan was introduced to the sensations of being a stage actor from a very young age. It was mainly due to his father, who was a veteran of Bengali theatre. He introduced the little Aryan on stage as the lead character of Amol in one of Tagore's plays, and the debutant was very well received by the audience. That is where it all started for him, actually. Well, one thing led to another, and Aryan now had his very own youth theatre group, the Storytellers, which gained considerable popularity in busying itself mainly with street plays and performances in some of those innumerable cultural festivals organized by colleges and universities all over the city. For myself, I should say I was the man behind the scenes. My friendship with Aryan developed very quickly, and I soon found myself taking a lot more responsibility for his work than I should. I stayed up late at night, attending his rehearsals, going through his lines over and over, correcting his expressions each and every time he faltered or was likely to falter, though it seldom do so. Aryan was good at emoting, but his memory betrayed him from time to time. I remember how I reproached him and how I made up peculiar mnemonics that would somehow make him remember. Then I had to look into his costumes and his makeup. I had to ensure Aryan didn't look like a cheap plastic action figure on stage, nor was he to look like a person woken up at 2 a.m. Strangely and surely, I became terribly involved with his performances. I couldn't have cared more if it was my own brother in Aryan's place. I was Aryan's mentor, and he my ever-obedient disciple. Without me, he would not have become the much-celebrated television and film actor that he is today. It was a beautiful relationship that I shared with Aryan. No friendship was ever so strong, so pure, so fruitful as ours. Maybe it was this boyish charm Aryan has always retained throughout his life. It made me feel for him like a person feels for his younger brother or sister, or in some cases like a father feels for his son. I will not hesitate to admit that the responsibilities I had to take for Aryan's sake was by no means a burden for me, as Aryan's achievements became my own. His dreams became my ambition. Aryan's life was as precious to me as mine. Aryan completed me. But this wondrous castle of sparkling white glass that I built for myself started to develop its own cracks without fail, and drifted towards destruction with the same inevitability with which a man is woken from his dreams. It was during the 18th production of the Storytellers at the Gyan Manch that this began. Aryan and his team had played to an extremely positive audience, and the curtain call was almost inaudible against their thunderous applause. Aryan, under my training, had learned to deal with this type of success and to control his excitement, and was sitting calmly facing his mirror in the green room while I was wiping the last bit of makeup from his forehead. Suddenly, Bishuda, one of the stagehands, rushed inside, his eyes glowing with excitement. The people inside were, to say the least, very surprised at this sudden intrusion and naturally demanded an explanation. The man paused for a while to catch his breath, then turned towards Aryan to say, "There is a man who wants to see you right away." What man? What does he want with Aryan? I inquired, mildly irritated. I never wanted Aryan to interact with strangers. There was a certain childlike innocence in him which I feared he would lose if he came in contact with the general public. Vishnu gasped once more for breath. His eyes widened when he said,
You don't want to miss this opportunity, Aryan. Chances like this come but once in a lifetime. Go, man, go. He's waiting. He told me not to tell you his name, but he wants to see you right now.
Now there undoubtedly was bait, hard to reject. So we took it, Aryan and I, and went outside with Bishuda on our heels. There was indeed a man waiting patiently out there beside the sound console, a tall, lean, bespectacled, middle-aged figure with long, back-brushed, jet-black hair, a closely cropped beard, and wearing an off-white kurta and dark blue corduroy trousers. Even in the dark shadows of the empty theatre, it was unmistakably clear who the man was. With more than a dozen national award-winning features in his bag, it would be difficult not to recognize the man who makes it to the front page of every entertainment magazine there is in the city every other week, especially if he was standing right in front of you with a warm, welcoming smile on his face. Bishuda stepped in front with an idiotic grin and gestured to Aryan while saying to the man,
Here he is, sir.
That was the first nail on the coffin. It was early next year when Aryan made his debut on the silver screen, here too as the lead actor. Coincidentally, this film was also based on a story by Tagore. Aryan would joke about this later in his interviews to the press, saying how Tagore played a key role in his life as an actor. There were a good deal of magazines and television channels ready to buy that line, for the film was a turning point for both Aryan and his director. After all, who would have dreamt of being felicitated in Venice for one's debut film? For Aryan, it was simply too good to be true. Little did he realize that he was standing just at the very edge of an endless chasm that would engulf him for the rest of his life. All these years, I tried my best to keep away Aryan from the hazards of that cruel, ugly world out there, waiting eagerly to drown anyone who approaches in its vitriolic poisons. All along I shielded him from the horrors of its demons, which constantly threatened to eat away at his soul. But now that Aryan had tasted this almost miraculous success that brought him toward so wide an audience, he was willing to experience anything and everything that this world had to offer, be it the pleasures or the pangs. The fact that he had been kept away, even if it was for his own good, from it so long, seemed to ignite in him an unquenchable desire to take it all in. All those things that satiate the senses and scar the soul. Gradually, Aryan began to slip out of my reins. Reason gave way to burning passion. My efforts of censoring were in vain, for the man who was once a mentor and guide had been reduced to nothing more than an irritating, over-inquisitive relative in Aryan's eyes. He treated my ways to reform him as clinical methods to trap and cripple him in a gilded cage of my own. I believe I shall never forget the day he first shouted at me, his beautiful face in a terrible contortion, his eyes bloodshot with rage. Only a mongrel is worthy of such a rash treatment. Yet I received it, and from none other than the man I myself created. What pain it is to see your very creation lash at you. Aryan was a different man now, far from the charming, innocent young lad I met all those years back. Fortune had surely smiled on him, for I do not know of another actor in our film industry who could ascend so much success in so little time. Not one of his films bit the dust. Accolades of all sorts were showered on him, both of national and international status. Newspaper magazines were literally feeding off him. All this gave more fuel to his desires and amplified his craving. And then newspapers started bearing some other news about Aryan. Reports started coming in of what he had done with all his fortune and with all his freedom, of his brawls and bashes, of his affairs and escapades, and of many other things I need not mention here, for it is not fit to record them on paper. How a man could undergo so radical a transformation was beyond my comprehension. At one point it seemed scandals of all sort were synonymous with Aryan Sengupta, the same person whom I trained, whose good looks have only been hyperbolized by age. To think that such degradation of the soul can be housed in so exquisite a casing. But the most abominable of all sins, the one which has made me contemplate the act you may interpret as crime, the reason for which I am writing all this, was yet to be committed by Aryan. If you have been keeping an eye over the news recently, you will have learned something of the suicide of a woman named Ayesha Kaushal, the reason for which still remains a mystery. It will remain so, and it is to change that very situation that I am compelled to write this explanation. Like many who utterly fail to understand the true nature of the person they fall in love with, Ayesha fell blindly in love with that wretched being who promised to reciprocate her feelings. For one thing, he took advantage of his acting skills, which had been perfected by none other than myself. Ayesha was of the noble type, and was truly a misfit for our present age of corruption and deceit. She had a strange belief that true love could change a man and turn him to good. Aryan first met her in her chamber. The nightmares of his dissolute life had been haunting his mind for quite some time, and he needed some professional help to keep the voices in his head quiet. Ayesha, being a reputed psychologist, seemed a good option. But, ironically, the doctor became the patient, and the patient the doctor. She believed too much in Aryan to give up hope. Maybe that's why she chose to hang herself in her bedroom when she read about Aryan's fresh involvement with his co-star, Rima Chaudhary. After all, there is no point in living when there is no hope, is it not so? So there you have it. That is the very reason why it must be done. With all his money, influence, and charm, Aryan can easily wriggle out of all those sticky situations he has created for himself. The police will never touch him, mysteries will remain unsolved, but the death of Ayesha Kaushal was just crossing the line. Is there not a saying that a poisonous vine should be nipped in the bud? Well, this vine has spread its poison far enough, and I intend to check that once and for all. I cannot go on seeing Aryan sinking deeper and deeper into the dark well of damnation. I know it will be difficult to put an end to something that I have worked so hard to make, but if it only brings pain and misery to others, I have no other option. That is all I have to say in this explanation. In conclusion, I only wish that big shot film director hadn't come to see our production that night at the theater.
Rajiv Bose.
What an extraordinary letter. And might I say, Inspector, that was a very good piece of narration.
Thank you, dear boy. The letter has a quality of its own, you see. It begs to be read a little, dramatically.
So, do we know the whereabouts of this Rajiv Bose? Who is he, this friend of his? Was he a fellow actor? Not that I've heard of him, but was he apprehended, this Mr. Bose?
Well, yes and no.
Yes and no.
That's right.
Oh. Well, I see the real mystery is yet to be revealed.
A lot of people don't know this, but Rajiv Bose is the real name of Aryan Sengupta. Aryan was Rajiv's screen name.
What?
You heard me. Aryan Sengupta was the name Rajiv first adopted for stage. That was in the late 70s. If I weren't supposed to know of this, if it weren't for Sweet old missus, and her in-depth knowledge of cinema artists. She's like this walking, talking encyclopedia on the subject. There's an entire bookcase full of film magazines dating back to God only knows when. All she does is gobble up whatever junk she can find in them, and remembers it by heart. That's her only hobby. I remember every time it was an Arianson Gupta film on Saturday night, she'd start telling me all she's learned about the man and thought that I'd be completely fascinated. How can you not love that comical creature?
Well, I can see why you call this incident singular. What a way to commit suicide! Good heavens!
And what a way to live. Two entities housed in one body. I tell you, old boy, the most fascinating thing about these cases I've come up against is how they reveal such intriguing facets of the human mind. Even a psychologist wouldn't have as much, wouldn't you say?
Indeed, Inspector, indeed. Well, folks, that is one truly spine-chilling twist to a horrendous crime. Wouldn't you agree? Goes to show that truth is indeed stranger than fiction. Thank you, Inspector Dutto, for sharing this with us. And we thank you once again for coming to our show.
My pleasure, old boy, my pleasure.
And that's our show for tonight, dear listeners. We'll be back next Sunday with another such thrilling story. Not from the pages of crime fiction, but from the files of the State Investigation Bureau on the Mystery Hour. Good night, ladies and gentlemen, and until next time, stay thrilled.